Commander Marcus Vale stood at the edge of the smoldering crater, his combat suit sensors screaming warnings about the toxic atmosphere of Nexus Prime. The battlefield stretched before him like a nightmare painted in shades of purple and crimson, illuminated by the dying light of 3 moons. Twisted metal and crystalline shards from destroyed Xeraxian vessels littered the ground, still humming with residual energy. Status report, he barked into his comm, watching as another explosion lit up the horizon. The silence that followed told him more than words could. Half his battalion was either dead or incapacitated, and the Xeraxian forces had them surrounded on 3 sides. "Sir, we've lost contact with Echo Squad," Lieutenant Diane Wong's voice crackled through the static. "And the orbital defense grid is..." A deafening boom cut her off as another plasma strike hit nearby, sending tremors through the ground. Vale steadied himself against a fallen war machine, its crystalline core still pulsing weakly. 20 years of war with the Xeraxians had taught humanity many things, but today's battle felt different. The enemy's attack seemed almost hesitant. That's when the humming started. It began as a low vibration, barely perceptible through his suit's dampeners, but quickly grew into a harmonious resonance that made the very air shimmer. The battlefield fell silent, an impossible quiet descending like a heavy curtain. Through the settling dust, a vessel unlike any Vale had seen before descended from the crimson clouds. It was organic in design, its surface rippling like liquid metal, adorned with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in rhythmic sequences. "Hold your fire," Vale ordered, though no one seemed inclined to shoot. The vessel touched down with impossible grace, and a section of its hull transformed into an elaborate staircase. Queen Nexura of the Xeraxian Empire emerged, her form both beautiful and terrifying. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, her silvery skin reflected the battlefield's glow, and her 4 eyes, each a different color of starlight, fixed upon Vale. Her ceremonial armor was alive, shifting and flowing around her like quicksilver. "Commander Marcus Vale of Earth," her voice resonated in his mind, translated by both technology and something more primitive, more ancient. "I have a proposition that will end this war." Vale's hand tightened on his pulse rifle. "With all due respect, Your Majesty, we've heard Xeraxian propositions before. They usually involve surrender or extinction." A sound like crystal wind chimes filled the air, her laughter. "No, Commander. I propose marriage." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the dying machines seemed to hold their breath. Vale's suit diagnostics indicated his heart rate had spiked dramatically. "Marriage," he repeated, wondering if his translator had malfunctioned. "To whom?" "To you, Commander Vale." Her 4 eyes glowed brighter. "Our species have fought for 2 decades, each believing the other incapable of understanding. We have both lost too much. Perhaps it is time we tried something our tactical computers cannot calculate, unity through bond." From the human lines, someone whispered a curse of disbelief. From the Xeraxian ranks, a low hum of approval rose like distant thunder. "This is unexpected," Vale managed, his tactical training failing to provide any protocol for alien marriage proposals in the middle of a battlefield. "The unexpected often holds the greatest potential for change," Nexura responded. "You have proven yourself a worthy adversary. Your strategies have earned you respect among my people. But more importantly, you have shown mercy when victory demanded none. Such qualities are rare in any species." Vale's mind raced. He thought of Earth's burning cities, of colonies reduced to asteroid fields, of friends lost to the void. He also thought of reports he'd seen, Xeraxian ships evacuating civilians before battles, their warriors refusing to fire on medical vessels. "And if I refuse?" "Then we continue as before," she said simply. "More will die. More worlds will burn. Until perhaps there is nothing left worth fighting for." Vale took a step forward, his boots crunching on crystalline debris. "And if I accept? Then you will enter our world, learn our ways, and help forge a peace that neither side could achieve alone." She extended a hand, her fingers elongated and elegant, tipped with points that could either caress or kill. You have 3 cycles of your Earth days to decide. Until then, I declare a ceasefire on all fronts. With that, she turned and ascended the stairs. The vessel rose silently, its hull rippling like water in zero gravity. As it disappeared into the clouds, the battlefield remained quiet, as if reality itself needed a moment to process what had just occurred. Vale's calm crackled to life. "Sir." Lieutenant Wong's voice was uncertain. Did you just get proposed to by the Queen of the Xeraxian Empire?" Vale watched the crimson clouds swirl where the ship had vanished. "Send word to command," he said finally. Tell them we need to update our diplomatic protocols." As the moons of Nexus Prime continued their eternal dance overhead, human and Xeraxian forces alike remained frozen in place, wondering if they had just witnessed the end of a war, or the beginning of something far more complex. The Xeraxian diplomatic vessel cut through space like a living dream, its bioorganic hull responding to stellar winds with graceful undulations. Commander Vale stood at a viewport that seemed to form and dissolve at will, watching his escort of both human and Xeraxian ships flanking their course through the star-studded void. "The Spiral Palace awaits," announced first speaker Kyrix, his translucent form shifting colors with each word. As the Queen's chief diplomat, he'd been assigned to prepare Vale for what lay ahead. "Though I should warn you, Commander, few humans have ever seen our capital and remained unchanged." Vale adjusted the environmental suit he'd been provided, a masterpiece of Xeraxian biotechnology that felt more like a second skin than armor. "Unchanged how?" "The palace exists in what you might call a fold in reality." Kyrix's skin rippled with patterns that indicated amusement. "It can be overwhelming for minds accustomed to linear space." As if on cue, the starfield before them twisted. Reality curved like a lens, and through that distortion, Vale saw it, the Spiral Palace of the Xeraxian Empire. His first thought was that it couldn't possibly be real. The structure, if it could be called that, was a massive double helix of crystalline light, each strand miles high, spinning slowly in opposite directions. Between the strands, smaller structures floated like dewdrops in a spider's web, connected by bridges of pure energy. The entire complex pulsed with a rhythm that matched the beating of distant stars. "That's impossible," Vale whispered. "Impossible is relative," Kyrix chimed. "As you'll learn, Commander, the Xeraxian understanding of physics differs somewhat from humanity's limited perspective." Their ship passed through an energy field that made Vale's new suit tingle. As they approached the palace proper, he noticed movement along the crystalline strands, thousands of Xeraxians going about their daily lives, their bodies shifting forms as needed. Some flew between levels on wings of light, others flowed like liquid through transparent tubes. The docking procedure was unlike anything in Vale's experience. The ship simply merged with the palace structure, its hull becoming one with the crystalline surface. When the entry portal formed, it was like stepping through a membrane between worlds. "The Queen awaits in the Chamber of Harmonies," Kyrix announced. "But first, you must be properly attuned." Vale found himself in a vast chamber where gravity seemed optional. Streams of colored light flowed around him like aurora borealis, and the air itself sang with complex harmonies. 3 Xeraxian attendants approached, their forms more fluid than any he'd seen before. "These are the Shapers," Kyrix explained. "They will help your biology adapt to the palace's resonance. Without this, the dimensional fluctuations could, well, let's just say it would be unpleasant." The process was strange but painless. The Shapers moved around Vale in a complex dance, their bodies emanating patterns of light that sank into his skin through the suit. He felt his perception shifting, expanding. Suddenly, he could see the energy flows that powered the palace, could feel the pulse of its crystalline heart. "Fascinating," one of the Shapers spoke, their voice a melody. "Your species' potential for adaptation is remarkable. Most visitors require hours of attunement. You've synchronized in minutes." As they moved through the palace corridors, Vale began to understand why humans had never successfully spied on the Xeraxian capital. The architecture ignored Euclidean geometry, with rooms that were bigger on the inside than the outside, corridors that looped back on themselves in impossible ways, and windows that showed different times of day depending on the angle of viewing. They passed gardens where plants grew in 4 dimensions, their flowers blooming backwards through time. They walked through a library where knowledge wasn't stored in books but in crystalline formations that shared memories directly with anyone who touched them. "Your quarters," Kirix announced, gesturing to a section of wall that transformed into an ornate doorway. Inside was a space that somehow managed to blend human comfort with Xeraxian aesthetics. A bed that looked normal enough, but floated on a cushion of light. Walls that responded to thought, becoming transparent or opaque as desired. "The Queen has requested your presence at the evening harmony," Kirix continued. "It's similar to what humans would call a state dinner, though with fewer solid foods and more synchronized consciousness." Vale turned to his guide. "Why me?" he asked finally. "Of all the human commanders, why did Queen Nexera choose me?" Kirix's form shifted to a deep blue, a color Vale was beginning to associate with seriousness. "Because, Commander Vale, you were the first to notice that our weapons were becoming progressively less lethal. Over the past year, we've been testing humanity's capacity for recognition of mercy. You were the only military leader who saw the pattern. We thought it was a malfunction," Vale admitted. "Or a new strategy. It was a test," Kirix's color lightened. "One you passed. The Queen believes that any species capable of recognizing mercy in the midst of war has hope of understanding us. Now, shall we prepare you for the evening harmony? I should warn you, it involves temporarily sharing consciousness with about 3,000 of our highest-ranking officials." Vale felt a headache forming. "Any chance we could start with something simpler? Like maybe sharing consciousness with just a dozen or so?" Kirix's laugh sounded like wind chimes in a storm. "I'll see what I can arrange. Though I should mention, the Queen has already begun preparing her own consciousness to merge with yours. It's considered a prerequisite for the marriage proposal." As Vale followed Kirix deeper into the impossible palace, he couldn't help but wonder if perhaps the old-fashioned human way of getting to know someone over dinner might have been simpler. But then again, nothing about falling in love with the queen of a reality-bending alien empire was ever going to be simple. The chamber of resonance hummed with an energy that made Vale's newly attuned senses tingle. Queen Nexera stood before him, her form more fluid than during their battlefield encounter, shifting between states of matter like light through crystal. Around them, the chamber's walls rippled with patterns that seemed to respond to their emotions. "The trial of harmonies begins," Nexera announced, her 4 eyes creating constellation patterns in the air between them. "Are you prepared, Commander Vale?" "As ready as anyone can be for sharing consciousness with an alien queen," Vale replied, managing a smile despite his nervousness. The past 3 days of preparation had taught him that Xeraxian humor appreciated honesty over politeness. "Then let us begin with the first resonance." The air crystallized around them. Vale felt his consciousness expanding, touching edges of perception he'd never known existed. Nexera's mind approached his like an ocean meeting a shore, powerful but carefully controlled. Their memories began to merge. He saw her childhood through 4-dimensional eyes, growing up in chambers that existed between spaces, learning to shift her form with the tides of reality, bearing the weight of an empire's future. She witnessed his life on Earth, the green fields of his youth, the academy years, the first time he commanded a starship into battle. "Your species feels so deeply," her thoughts whispered through his mind. "You experience time as a river, yet you love and dream as if you had eternities. And yours," he responded in thought, "sees reality as clay to be molded, yet you cherish traditions older than our civilizations." The merge deepened. Vale felt the moment she decided to end the war, watching through her eyes as reports came in of human ships protecting civilian vessels, even enemy ones, during battles. He shared her revelation that any species capable of such actions, even toward enemies, might be worthy of more than conquest. The first resonance ended gradually, like waves receding from sand. Vale found himself gasping, his mind expanding with new understanding. "You've adapted well," Nexera observed, her form solidifying slightly. Most non-Xeraxians require healing sleep after their first merge. Maybe humans are more compatible with your species than everyone thought, Vale suggested, still processing the lingering echoes of her memories. Perhaps. But now comes the more challenging trial. She gestured, and the chamber transformed around them. They stood in what appeared to be a war room, but one that operated in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The trial of consequence. Holographic displays materialized, showing key moments from the 20-year war. But these weren't simple recordings, they were quantum imprints, capturing not just events but all possible outcomes that could have occurred. Your task, Nexera explained, is to navigate these moments of decision. Not to change the past, but to understand the paths not taken. To see why peace was impossible until now. For hours, they moved through the quantum scenarios. Vale witnessed battles from both sides simultaneously, felt the weight of decisions that had seemed simple at the time but carried devastating consequences. He saw how misunderstandings had cascaded into atrocities, how fear had bred more fear. There, he said suddenly, pointing to a particular moment 3 years ago. That's when everything could have changed. The scene expanded, a human colony ship, damaged and drifting into Xeraxian space. The local Xeraxian commander had offered assistance, breaking protocol. The humans, suspicious of a trap, had opened fire. The resulting battle had hardened attitudes on both sides for years. Yes, Nexera agreed, her form pulsing with approval. You see it clearly. The moment when trust could have overcome fear. We were both so convinced we knew what the other side was thinking, Vale mused. Both trying to protect our people, both making things worse. The chamber shifted again, this time becoming a vast space filled with floating crystals, each containing what appeared to be living equations. The final trial, Nexera announced. The understanding of forms. A crystal floated down between them, its equations dancing with complex beauty. This contains the base genetic code that allows Xeraxians to shift form, she explained. You must learn to read it, not with your eyes or mind, but with your entire being. Vale stared at the crystal, letting his newly expanded consciousness reach out to it. The equations began to make sense, not as mathematics, but as poetry written in the language of life itself. It's beautiful, he breathed. Your species doesn't just change shape. You're in constant dialogue with reality itself. Yes, Nexera's voice carried approval. And do you understand now why traditional diplomacy could never bridge our differences? Why it had to be something more, intimate? Vale nodded slowly. We needed to do more than talk. We needed to understand each other at the deepest level possible. And that understanding comes with a price, she added softly. The changes happening to your perception, they're permanent. You'll never see reality quite the same way again. Is that why no human has ever returned from these chambers unchanged? Yes. But you're the first to embrace the change rather than fight it. Her form shifted closer, her 4 eyes creating patterns that spoke of hope and possibility. The final choice approaches, Commander Vale. Once the last trial is complete, you must decide, will you help forge this bridge between our species? Will you help us end this war not through victory, but through transformation? Vale looked at his hands, noticing for the first time that they seemed to shimmer slightly, as if his own form was beginning to respond to the quantum nature of the palace. The choice before him was more than marriage, more than politics. It was about becoming something entirely new, neither fully human nor Xeraxian, but perhaps a first step towards something greater than both. When do we begin? He asked. The chamber resonated with her approval, and the final trial commenced, their consciousness once again merging, but this time reaching towards something unprecedented in either of their species' histories. The emergency transmission cut through Vale's meditation like a knife through silk. Lieutenant Wong's hologram materialized in his quarters, her expression grave despite the quantum distortion. Commander, we have a situation. The Earth Defense Council they're planning something. Something big. Vale's newly enhanced senses picked up subtle vibrations through the palace walls, tension spreading through the crystalline structure like ripples in a pond. 3 weeks in the spiral palace had changed him more than he'd expected, attuning him to its living architecture. Details, Lieutenant. They're calling it Operation Sundering. Wong's image flickered. They think the Zyraxians are stalling, using these ceremonies to prepare for a final strike. They've authorized the deployment of quantum destabilizers. Vale felt his blood run cold. Quantum destabilizers, weapons designed to unravel the very fabric of spacetime. They'd been theoretical when he'd left Earth. How long? 72 hours. Admiral Kosh says either you extract yourself from the palace, or... She didn't need to finish the sentence. The wall beside Vale transformed, revealing first speaker Kirix, his crystalline form pulsing with troubled colors. We intercepted similar communications. The warrior caste is taking it as confirmation of human treachery. They're calling for immediate action. Vale stood, noticing his reflection in a nearby surface. His eyes now held a slight shimmer, and his skin occasionally rippled with bioluminescent patterns. The changes weren't just mental anymore. I need to speak with the Queen. She's in the Chamber of Eternal Tide, Kirix chimed. But Commander, she's not alone. The High Council has convened. Vale navigated the palace's impossible geometry, passing through spaces that folded in on themselves. He'd learned to move through these non-Euclidean corridors without the vertigo that had initially plagued him. The Chamber of Eternal Tide hung suspended in a void of swirling energies, its boundaries more suggestion than substance. Inside, Queen Nexera stood surrounded by the High Council, 12 of the most powerful Zyraxians, their forms barely contained by conventional physics. The argument taking place rippled through multiple dimensions. The humans prove their nature. High Counselor Vex's voice resonated through several frequencies at once. While we open our sacred spaces, they prepare weapons of unmaking. They fear what they don't understand, Nexera countered, her 4 eyes creating complex patterns of light. As we once did. Vale stepped into the chamber, and all attention shifted to him. He felt their consciousness brush against his, some curious, others hostile. Commander Vale, Nexera acknowledged, her tone carrying layers of meaning. Your people make ready for war even as we prepare for union. As do yours, he responded, projecting his thoughts in the Zyraxian manner he'd learned. Fear breeds fear. But I've seen another path. He approached the center of the chamber, where the eternal tide, a flow of pure quantum probability, swirled in endless patterns. With his enhanced perception, he could read its currents like a book. Look, he commanded, reaching into the tide. His consciousness merged with its flow, projecting images for all to see. The possible future spiraled out before them, war and its aftermath, the devastation of quantum weapons, worlds torn apart not just in space but in time. This is one path, he continued, shifting the currents. But there's another. The images changed, showing something new, humans and Zyraxians working together, their different perspectives combining to solve problems neither could handle alone. Ships of hybrid design exploring regions of space previously inaccessible. Children, both human and Zyraxian, learning to see through each other's eyes. Impossible, Vex declared, but with less certainty. We made the impossible real the moment your queen proposed to a human soldier, Vale countered. The moment both sides chose to try something new. Nexera moved to stand beside him, her form harmonizing with his in a way that made several council members pulse with surprise. The changes in him are proof, she said. Humans can adapt, can understand. They can become more than they are, as can we. But the weapons they prepare. Another council member began. Give me 6 hours, Vale interrupted. Let me show you something even your quantum sciences haven't predicted. The council chambers erupted in discussion, conversations happening across multiple planes of existence simultaneously. Vale stood firm, though he could feel time running out in more ways than one. The changes in his body were accelerating, soon he would be neither fully human nor Zyraxian, but something else entirely. Finally, Nexera raised her hand, bringing silence. "Speak your plan, Commander Vale. Show us this path you see." Vale smiled, and for a moment his form shifted like theirs, becoming something fluid and crystalline before settling back to mostly human. "It's not about showing them our strength," he said. "It's about showing them their own reflection in us. And to do that, we're going to need to break a few laws of physics." The eternal tide swirled faster, as if responding to his words. In its depths, a new possibility began to take shape, one that would either bridge the gap between their species forever, or tear reality itself apart in the attempt. The spiral palace trembled as reality itself seemed to protest what Vale and Nexera were attempting. In the heart of the structure, where quantum probability met physical space, they had constructed something unprecedented, a bridge not just between locations, but between ways of being. "The quantum harmonizers are at critical resonance," Kirix announced, his crystalline form vibrating with tension. "If this fails..." "It won't," Vale and Nexera spoke in unison, their consciousness partially merged as they guided the energies flowing through the palace's core. Vale's form flickered between states, sometimes human, sometimes crystalline, sometimes both and neither at once. Reports flowed in from across space. The Earth Defense Fleet had launched, quantum destabilizers primed. The Xeraxian warrior caste had mobilized their reality-warping ships. Both sides were minutes away from unleashing weapons that would tear the fabric of spacetime. "Now," Vale commanded, his voice resonating across multiple dimensions. The device they'd constructed, a fusion of human ingenuity and Xeraxian quantum science, activated. The palace's core began to pulse with impossible light. Through their merged consciousness, Nexera added her power to his. "Let them see." The bridge activated. Across every human ship and Xeraxian vessel, across every colony and homeworld, reality shifted. For one eternal moment, every human experienced existence as a Xeraxian, and every Xeraxian knew what it meant to be human. Admirals felt the quantum dance of crystalline thought. Warriors understood the fierce, beautiful limitation of linear time. Children on both sides glimpsed futures where differences became strengths. In that moment of universal empathy, weapons powered down. Ships halted their advance. The universe held its breath. "By the eternal tide," High Counselor Vex whispered, his hostile stance softening as human understanding filtered through his consciousness. "They feel so much, yet endure." On the flagship of Earth's fleet, Admiral Kosh staggered as Xeraxian perception flooded his mind. "They're not our enemies," he realized. "They're our mirror, showing us what we could become." The bridge maintained its connection for precisely 6 minutes and 23 seconds, long enough to change everything. When it finally collapsed, Vale fell to his knees, his form stabilizing into something new. Not quite human anymore, but not Xeraxian either. A bridge made flesh. Nexera helped him up, her 4 eyes creating patterns that spoke of pride and concern. "You realize there's no going back. The changes to your biology, to your very being, were worth it," he finished. "Besides, change was always the point, wasn't it? For both our species." Reports began flooding in from across both empires. The quantum destabilizers were being stood down. The warrior caste had called for peace talks. And everywhere, people were looking at each other, and themselves, with new eyes. Lieutenant Wong's hologram appeared, her expression a mix of awe and confusion. "Commander, what did you do to us?" "Gave everyone a new perspective," Vale smiled. "Hard to hate what you've been inside of, even for a moment." The High Council convened one final time, their forms now shifting occasionally into human shapes, as if trying to maintain the connection they'd briefly experienced. Their declaration was unanimous: the war was over. "The union of our species will not be sealed just by our marriage," Nexera said to Vale, as they stood watching both fleets begin to intermingle, crews eagerly exchanging visitors. "It will take generations of work, of learning, of growing together." "Good thing we'll be around to see it," Vale replied, noticing how his hand had temporarily crystallized where it held hers. Though I have to ask, did you know this would happen? When you proposed on that battlefield, did you see this future? Nexera's laugh chimed through multiple dimensions. I saw possibility. You taught me to see hope. She paused, her form shifting slightly. The humans will need guides to understand their new perceptions. The Zyraxians will need teachers to comprehend human emotion. We've given them the ability to change, but they'll need help walking the path. Then we'll build more bridges, Vale said, watching as human ships began docking with the Spiral Palace, their crews eager to explore this new reality. After all, that's what brought us together in the first place, the willingness to try something impossible. Above them, the three moons of Nexus Prime aligned, casting light through the palace's crystalline structure. The light split into countless colors, each one representing a possible future. But now, instead of paths of war and destruction, they showed ways forward, together. There will be challenges, Nexera observed, as reports of minor incidents and misunderstandings already began to filter in. Not everyone will adapt easily to such change. That's why they'll need us, Vale replied, his form shifting briefly to match hers before settling back into its new hybrid state. To show them that the impossible is just the beginning. As if in response, the palace hummed with new energy. In its quantum core, the patterns of human DNA began a slow dance with Zyraxian quantum structures, each adapting to the other, creating something that had never existed before. A future neither side could have reached alone. The battlefield that had fallen silent when a queen proposed to a human had become the birthplace of a new species, one that carried the best of both worlds in its very being. And somewhere in the quantum probability streams, in the endless dance of possibility, the universe itself seemed to smile at the sheer audacity of love bridging the gap between stars.